The gears of the town clock had stopped turning 3 years ago, and Zelda Carmichael intended to fix them before sunset, no matter how many men told her it was impossible. She stood on the wooden scaffolding she had built herself, 100 feet above Main Street in Sheridan, Wyoming, with her leather tool belt cinched tight around her waist and her dark hair tied back with a strip of worn calico. The summer of 1882 burned hot and bright, the kind of heat that made the mountains in the distance shimmer like they were dancing. Below her, the townsfolk had gathered in clusters, pointing up at her and shaking their heads with the same mixture of fascination and skepticism they always showed when she took on work that belonged to men. Zelda did not care what they thought. She had learned long ago that caring about other people's opinions was a luxury a woman in her position could not afford. Her father had been a watchmaker in Philadelphia, and he had taught her everything he knew before the consumption took him when she was 16. Her mother had died bringing her into the world, so when her father passed, Zelda was alone with nothing but his tools and the skills he had given her. She had come west 2 years ago, following rumors of opportunities in the mining towns and cattle settlements that dotted the Wyoming territory, and she had made a name for herself fixing everything from pocket watches to mill machinery. But the clock tower was her masterpiece, or it would be if she could get the damned thing working again. She wiped the sweat from her forehead and peered into the housing that contained the main gear assembly. The problem was immediately apparent to anyone who knew what they were looking for. The central shaft had cracked, probably during one of the brutal winters when the temperature dropped so low that metal became brittle as glass. 3 different men had climbed up here before her, all of them declaring the repair impossible without completely replacing the mechanism, which would cost more money than the town of Sheridan had in its entire treasury. Zelda had other ideas. She had spent the last month fabricating a brass sleeve that would fit over the cracked section of the shaft, reinforcing it without requiring a full replacement. The piece was tucked in her tool belt right now, wrapped carefully in oiled cloth. The tricky part would be removing the damaged shaft without disturbing the intricate arrangement of gears and counterweights that made the whole system function. One wrong move, and she would send 3 tons of carefully balanced machinery crashing down through the tower, possibly taking her with it. She loved this work precisely because of challenges like that. The sun climbed higher as she worked, and the crowd below gradually dispersed as people returned to their daily business. Zelda was grateful for the solitude. She needed to concentrate, to feel the resistance of each bolt and understand the weight distribution of every component before she made her move. Her hands moved with practiced confidence, loosening connections and supporting heavy pieces with improvised bracing until the cracked shaft was isolated. That was when she heard the voice from below. "You planning to be up there all day, or are you going to come down and let a professional handle this?" Zelda did not bother looking down. She recognized the voice of Frank Morrison, the local blacksmith who had been one of the 3 men to declare the clock unrepairable. He had also made it abundantly clear that he did not think women belonged anywhere near machinery, never mind 100 feet in the air. "I will come down when the job is finished," she called back, not taking her eyes off the shaft, "which should be in about 3 more hours if people stop interrupting me." 3 hours. Morrison's laugh was harsh and mocking. "Honey, I spent 2 weeks studying that mechanism. There is no way to fix it without a full replacement. You are wasting your time and risking your neck for nothing." Zelda set down her wrench and finally looked over the edge of the scaffolding. Morrison stood in the street with his arms crossed, his face red from the heat and his expression smug. Several other men had gathered around him, curious to see what the commotion was about. "Then I suppose you will be very surprised in 3 hours," Zelda said evenly. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do." She turned back to the mechanism before Morrison could respond, effectively ending the conversation. She heard him mutter something to the other men, followed by laughter, but she forced herself to ignore it. Getting angry would only cloud her judgment, and she needed absolute clarity for what came next. The brass sleeve slid into place perfectly, just as she had calculated. Zelda worked it carefully over the cracked section, then began the painstaking process of securing it with a series of small bolts that would distribute the stress evenly. Her fingers ached from the precision work, and her back screamed from being bent in an awkward position, but she kept going. This was the moment of truth. If the sleeve did not hold, if her calculations were off by even a fraction, the whole system would seize up the moment she tried to engage it. 2 hours later, with the sun beginning its descent toward the mountains, Zelda reconnected the last gear and stepped back to admire her work. The sleeve was invisible unless you knew exactly where to look, and the shaft now had more structural integrity than it had possessed when it was new. She had done it. Now came the test. She climbed down the interior of the tower to the winding mechanism on the ground floor. The key was massive, nearly 3 feet long, and it took all her strength to turn it. She wound the spring carefully, counting the rotations until she felt the resistance that indicated full tension. Then she climbed back up to the scaffolding and waited. For a long moment, nothing happened. Zelda's heart hammered in her chest, doubt creeping in despite her confidence in her calculations. Then she heard it, a soft click, followed by a low grinding sound as the gears began to turn. The minute hand shuddered, stuck in place by 3 years of inactivity. Zelda held her breath. The grinding grew louder, the sound of metal pushing past resistance. Then, with a snap that echoed across the street, the minute hand jumped forward. The clock was running. Zelda could not stop the smile that spread across her face. She leaned against the housing, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was, and watched the minute hand make its slow journey around the face. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. The cheering from below startled her. She looked down to find that a crowd had gathered again, bigger than before, and they were whooping and clapping as they watched the clock tower come back to life. Zelda felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the summer sun. She was not accustomed to praise, and certainly not from an entire town at once. She climbed down as quickly as she dared, her legs shaky from fatigue. When she reached the ground, she was immediately surrounded by well-wishers offering congratulations and asking how she had accomplished what 3 experienced men could not. Zelda answered their questions as best she could, though she suspected most of them did not really understand the technical explanations she provided. That was when she saw him. He stood at the edge of the crowd, one shoulder leaning against the post that held up the awning of the general store. He was tall, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water after a storm. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, denim trousers worn smooth at the knees, a chambray shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle, and a wide-brimmed hat pushed back on his head. A gun belt rode low on his hips, but the revolver looked well-maintained and practical rather than showy. He was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. Not skepticism, like Morrison had shown, but something more like fascination. When their eyes met, he straightened up and walked toward her with the easy, rolling gait of someone who spent more time on horseback than on foot. The crowd parted for him, without seeming to realize they were doing it. Zelda got the impression that he was someone people respected, though she had never seen him before in her 2 years in Sheridan. He stopped a few feet away and touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that was more polite than deferential. Up close, she could see that he was probably in his mid-20s, maybe a year or two older than her own 23 years. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, pale against his tanned skin, and there was a wariness in his eyes that spoke of hard experience. "That was mighty impressive, miss," he said. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel rolling in a creek bed. "I have been watching men try to fix that clock for 3 years. You made it look easy." Zelda wiped her hands on her trousers, suddenly self-conscious about her oil-stained clothes and wind-blown hair. "It was not easy," she said, "but it was possible. People often confuse those two things." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I reckon they do." He extended his hand. "Cole Jackson. I run cattle up in the foothills." She shook his hand, noting the calluses that spoke of hard work and the strength in his grip that he was careful not to use fully. "Zelda Carmichael, I fix things." "I can see that." Cole looked up at the clock tower, where the minute hand was now making steady progress. "You can fix anything, I bet." There was something in the way he said it, a weight to the words that made them feel like more than casual conversation. Zelda found herself studying his face, looking for the mockery or disbelief she was used to receiving from men. She found neither. He seemed genuinely impressed and maybe a little bit awed. "Not anything," she said, though she felt a small thrill at the compliment. "But most things, yes." "Would you fix something for me?" The question came quickly, as if he had been working up the nerve to ask it. "I will pay whatever you think is fair. It is important." Zelda hesitated. She had planned to rest for a few days after completing the clock tower, but there was something about Cole Jackson that intrigued her. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, like she was a person worth respecting rather than a curiosity to be gawked at. Maybe it was the quiet desperation she detected beneath his casual tone. "What needs fixing?" she asked. Cole glanced around at the crowd, which was still milling about and clearly listening to their conversation. "Could we talk somewhere more private? It is kind of a long story." Zelda considered this. Her father had warned her about going off alone with strange men, but she had been supporting herself in the West for 2 years now, and she had learned to trust her instincts about people. Cole Jackson did not set off any warning bells. If anything, he seemed uncomfortable with the attention the crowd was giving them. "There is a cafe 2 streets over," she said. "We could talk there." Cole nodded, relief evident in his expression. "I would appreciate that." They walked in silence through the dusty streets of Sheridan. The town had grown considerably since Zelda had arrived, swelling with new settlers drawn by the promise of land and opportunity. The railroad had reached Sheridan just last year, and already there was talk of the town becoming a major hub for the cattle industry. New buildings were going up every week, the sound of hammers and saws a constant background noise. The cafe was a small establishment run by a widow named Mrs. Henderson. Zelda ate there regularly because the food was good, and Mrs. Henderson did not care that her customer wore trousers and worked with her hands. They took a table in the back corner, away from the other patrons, and ordered coffee and pie. Once they were settled, Cole took off his hat and set it on the empty chair beside him. His hair was dark brown and slightly too long, curling at the collar of his shirt. He had the kind of face that would have been boyishly handsome if not for the hard set of his jaw, and the way his eyes never quite stopped scanning the room, as if he was always expecting trouble. "So," Zelda said, wrapping her hands around the warm coffee cup. "What is it you need fixed?" Cole was quiet for a moment, seeming to gather his thoughts. "It is a music box," he finally said. "It belonged to my mother. She died 6 years ago, and the music box was one of the few things she left behind. It stopped working about a year ago, and I have been trying to find someone who could repair it ever since." Zelda felt a pang of sympathy. She knew what it was like to lose a parent, to cling to the small objects that kept their memory alive. "I would be happy to look at it," she said gently. "Music boxes can be tricky, but they are not so different from watches. Smaller gears, more delicate springs." Relief washed over Cole's face. "I was hoping you would say that. I took it to a jeweler in Cheyenne, but he said it was too damaged to fix, something about the cylinder being bent." "A bent cylinder is not the end of the world," Zelda said. "It depends on how badly it is bent and whether the pins are still intact." "I will need to examine it to give you a proper assessment." "I have it at my ranch," Cole said. "It is about an hour's ride north of town. If you would be willing to come out there, I could show you." He paused, then added quickly, "I could pay you for your time even if you decide it cannot be fixed, and I would make sure you had a proper escort back to town. I know it is not appropriate to ask a lady to travel alone with a man she has just met." Zelda appreciated his consideration, though she found it slightly amusing. She had traveled alone through far more dangerous territory than the road to a ranch just north of Sheridan. "I can ride out tomorrow morning if that suits you," she said. "And you do not need to worry about an escort. I am quite capable of taking care of myself." Cole looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. "Tomorrow morning would be perfect. The ranch is called the Double J. Anyone in town can give you directions." They finished their pie and coffee while Cole told her more about the ranch. He had inherited it from his father 5 years ago, when a riding accident had left him an orphan at 20. It was a modest operation, just Cole and 3 hired hands managing about 500 head of cattle on land that stretched from the foothills up into the mountains. It was hard work, he said, especially since he had to do most of the skilled labor himself. Good cowhands were hard to find, and the ones with real experience wanted wages he could barely afford. Zelda listened with genuine interest. She had always been curious about the cattle industry that formed the backbone of Wyoming's economy, but most ranchers were not interested in explaining their business to a woman. Cole, however, seemed happy to talk about it. He spoke with obvious pride about the quality of his herd and his plans to expand once he had saved enough capital. "You really love it," Zelda observed. "The ranch, I mean. The work," Cole nodded. "It is all I have ever wanted to do. My father brought us out here from Missouri when I was 10 years old. He said this was a place where a man could build something that would last, something he could pass down to his children." His expression grew distant. "I want to make him proud, to prove that he was right to believe in this place." "I think you are doing that," Zelda said softly. "It takes courage to keep going after losing both parents so young." Cole met her eyes, and for a moment she saw past the tough exterior to the grief he still carried. "I could say the same about you, Mrs. Henderson told me you came here alone after your father died. That takes more than courage. That takes determination." Zelda felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. It was rare to meet someone who understood that kind of loss, who knew what it meant to be truly alone in the world. "We do what we have to do," she said. "We survive, and if we are lucky, we build something worthwhile along the way." "Like fixing impossible clocks," Cole said with a slight smile. "Like fixing impossible clocks," Zelda agreed. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily between them. Zelda learned that Cole had taught himself to read using his mother's Bible and a collection of dime novels he traded for at the general store. He loved books, but rarely had time to enjoy them during the summer months when the ranch demanded every hour of daylight. In the winter, when the cattle were settled and the work slowed down, he would read by lamplight until the early hours of the morning. Zelda told him about her father's workshop in Philadelphia, about the intricate timepieces he had created for wealthy clients, and how she had spent her childhood watching him work, memorizing every technique and tool. She described the journey west, the fear and excitement of traveling alone, and the satisfaction of proving herself in a place where people judged you by what you could do rather than who your family was. By the time they left the cafe, the sun was setting and the shadows were growing long. Cole walked her back to the boarding house where she rented a room, his horse trailing behind him on a loose lead. At the front steps, he paused and turned to her. "Thank you for agreeing to help me with the music box," he said. "It means more than you know." "I have not fixed it yet," Zelda reminded him. "I might not be able to." "I have a feeling you will," Cole said. "You can fix anything, remember," Zelda laughed. "We will see about that." She watched him mount his horse and ride away into the gathering darkness, and she found herself looking forward to tomorrow morning with an anticipation that surprised her. She told herself it was just excitement about the challenge of repairing a complicated music box, but deep down she knew it was more than that. There was something about Cole Jackson that had gotten under her skin. The next morning dawned clear and cool, with the promise of another hot day once the sun climbed higher. Zelda packed her tools carefully into saddlebags and paid a visit to the livery stable, where she kept the sturdy bay mare she had purchased 6 months ago. The horse, which she had named Athena after the Greek goddess of wisdom and skill, greeted her with a soft nicker and accepted the apples Zelda had brought as a treat. The ride north was pleasant. The road followed the Goose Creek through rolling grassland dotted with stands of cottonwood and willow. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still crowned with snow despite the summer heat. Zelda passed several other ranches along the way, recognizing the brands burned into fence posts and identifying the different breeds of cattle grazing in the pastures. The Double J was smaller than some of the spreads she passed, but it was well maintained. The fences were straight and sturdy, the pastures showed signs of careful management, and the buildings had the look of structures that were regularly repaired and improved. The ranch house itself was a simple log construction with a covered porch and a stone chimney. A barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, and a corral held about a dozen horses in various stages of training. Cole emerged from the barn as she rode up, wiping his hands on a rag. He had clearly been working already, his shirt damp with sweat and a streak of what looked like axle grease on his jaw. When he saw her, his face brightened in a way that made Zelda's heart skip. "You found it all right," he said, reaching up to help her dismount. His hands were strong and steady on her waist, and he held on just a fraction of a second longer than necessary before stepping back. "I was starting to worry you had gotten lost." "I am very good with directions," Zelda said, patting Athena's neck. "It comes from years of reading mechanical drawings. You learn to think spatially." Cole grinned. "I will take your word for it. Come on inside. I will get you some water and show you the music box." The interior of the ranch house was Spartan but clean. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. A wooden table and chairs occupied the center of the space, and a pair of comfortable-looking armchairs flanked the fireplace. A hallway led to what Zelda assumed were bedrooms. What caught her attention, however, were the books. They were everywhere, stacked on shelves built into the walls, piled on the floor beside the armchairs, tucked into every available space. She saw novels and histories, agricultural manuals and poetry collections, even a few scientific treatises that looked well read. "You are not exaggerating about loving books," she said. Cole looked almost embarrassed. "It is a weakness of mine. I probably spend too much money on them, but they are the only luxury I allow myself." He crossed to a small cabinet near the fireplace and removed a wooden box about the size of a loaf of bread. He handled it with obvious care, as if it were made of glass. Zelda took the music box from him and carried it to the table where the light was better. The exterior was beautiful, made of burled walnut with inlaid brass corners, and a small key that had been turned so many times the metal was worn smooth. She opened the lid carefully and peered inside. The mechanism was indeed damaged. The cylinder that held the pins responsible for plucking the comb to create music was bent, just as the jeweler in Cheyenne had said. But Zelda could see immediately that it was not beyond repair. The bend was slight and located in a section where she could work on it without disturbing the delicate pins. The spring looked intact, and the comb showed no signs of damage. "I can fix this," she said. Cole, who had been standing behind her with visible tension in his shoulders, let out a breath. "You are certain?" "I am certain." Zelda looked up at him and smiled. "It will take a few days. I will need to disassemble it carefully and use some specialized tools to straighten the cylinder without damaging the pins. But yes, I can fix this." Cole sat down heavily in the chair opposite her, and Zelda realized just how much this had been weighing on him. "I cannot tell you what this means to me," he said quietly. "That music box is the only thing I have that still connects me to her. Sometimes I lie awake at night and try to remember what the song sounded like, but it has been so long that I am not sure my memory is accurate anymore." Zelda reached across the table and placed her hand over his. The gesture was impulsive, more intimate than she would normally allow with someone she had just met, but it felt right. "You will hear it again soon," she promised, "and it will be exactly as you remember." Cole turned his hand over so their palms pressed together. His skin was rough with calluses, warm from the morning's work. "Thank you, Zelda, truly." They sat like that for a moment, hands joined across the table, and Zelda felt something shift between them. It was as if the air in the room had changed, becoming charged with a possibility that both excited and frightened her. She had told herself that she did not have time for romance, that her work had to come first. But looking into Cole's eyes, she wondered if maybe she had been wrong. The spell was broken by the sound of hoofbeats outside. Cole released her hand and stood, moving to the window. "That will be my hands coming back from checking the north pasture. I need to talk to them about moving the herd to fresh grazing." He turned back to Zelda. "You are welcome to work here if you would like. I have a small workshop in one of the sheds where I do repairs on tack and equipment. It is not much, but the light is good and there is a sturdy workbench." "That would be perfect," Zelda said, "if you are certain I would not be in the way." "You could never be in the way." The words came out more earnest than Cole seemed to have intended. He cleared his throat and looked away, a faint flush creeping up his neck. "I mean, you are welcome to stay as long as you need. I enjoy the company." Zelda smiled. "Then I will take you up on that offer." She spent the rest of the morning in the workshop, which was exactly as Cole had described. Small but functional, with excellent natural light from a large window that looked out over the corral. She began the delicate process of disassembling the music box, laying out each component on a clean cloth, and making careful notes about how everything fit together. Cole checked on her around midday, bringing sandwiches and lemonade. He watched her work for a few minutes, fascinated by the precision of her movements and the array of tiny tools she used. "I have seen gunsmiths who did not have hands as steady as yours," he observed. "A gunsmith works with tolerances measured in fractions of an inch," Zelda said without looking up. "A watchmaker works with tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter. You learn to be steady or you find a different profession. Where did you get all those tools?" I have never seen anything like them. Most of them were my father's. Some I have made myself when I needed something specific. She held up a tool that looked like a tiny screwdriver with a magnifying glass attached. This one, for example. I needed to work on the escapement of a particularly small watch, and none of my standard tools could reach without blocking my view. So I made this. Cole shook his head in admiration. You really can fix anything. Over the next few days, a pattern developed. Zelda would arrive at the Double J early in the morning and work in the workshop until the heat made it unbearable, usually around midday. Then she and Cole would eat lunch together, sitting on the porch where they could catch whatever breeze might be stirring. In the afternoons, when it was too hot to work on anything requiring fine precision, Cole would take her around the ranch, showing her the operation and explaining the intricacies of managing cattle. Zelda found herself fascinated by the work. She had always thought of ranching as simple, almost primitive compared to the precision of mechanical work. But as Cole explained the careful breeding programs, the rotation of pastures to prevent overgrazing, and the constant vigilance required to keep the herd healthy, she realized it was every bit as complex as anything she did. It just required a different kind of knowledge. Cole seemed equally fascinated by her work. He would spend hours watching her manipulate the tiny components of the music box, asking questions about how each piece functioned and why it was shaped the way it was. Zelda had never met someone so genuinely interested in understanding what she did. Most people wanted their broken items fixed, but had no desire to know the details. Cole wanted to understand everything. On the third day, as they sat on the porch eating sandwiches and watching the horses in the corral, Cole said, "Can I ask you something personal?" Zelda looked at him curiously. "You can ask. I might not answer. Why did you really come west? I know you said it was for opportunities, but you could have found work in Philadelphia. Your father must have had clients who would have taken you on." Zelda was quiet for a moment, considering how much to reveal. But she had come to trust Cole over these past few days, and she found that she wanted to be honest with him. "My father did have clients who offered me work," she said. "But they wanted me to do piecework in a factory, assembling components that other people designed. They did not want a woman working on real repairs, certainly not on anything important. One man actually told me that I should get married and let my husband support me, that working with my hands was unladylike." Cole made a disgusted sound. "That is ridiculous. I thought so too. But that was the world I was living in. Every door I tried to open was closed because I was a woman. So I decided to go somewhere where there were fewer doors, fewer rules, and more people willing to judge me by what I could do rather than what I was." She smiled. "The West is not perfect. I still face prejudice, still have to work twice as hard to prove myself. But at least here, if I succeed, people notice. Back in Philadelphia, I could have been the best watchmaker in the city and no one would have cared." "Their loss," Cole said firmly. "Our gain." "Our gain," Cole met her eyes. "Sheridan's gain. The town is lucky to have you." "Just the town?" Zelda asked softly. Cole's expression became serious. "No, not just the town." He set down his sandwich and turned to face her fully. "I have been trying to figure out how to say this for the past 3 days. Hell, I have been trying to figure out how to say it since I first saw you standing on that scaffolding, covered in grease and completely in control. I know we have only just met, and I know you probably think I am crazy, but I need to be honest with you." Zelda's heart was pounding. "I am listening. I think you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. You are brilliant and brave and completely yourself in a way that most people never manage to be. When I am around you, I feel like I can breathe properly for the first time in years. And I know it is too soon. I know I should wait longer before saying anything, but I need you to know that I am not just interested in you fixing my mother's music box. I am interested in you." Zelda felt like all the air had left her lungs. She had hoped, over these past few days, that the connection she felt was not one-sided. But hearing Cole say it out loud was different from imagining it. It made it real, and real things could hurt you in ways that imagination never could. "I am interested in you too," she said, the words coming out barely above a whisper. "I have been trying not to be because I thought it would be a distraction. I have worked so hard to build a reputation, to prove myself. I thought caring about someone would make me weak, would give people another reason to dismiss me." Cole reached over and took her hand. "Caring about someone does not make you weak. It makes you human, and anyone who would dismiss you for any reason is a fool." Zelda laughed, though it came out a little shaky. "You barely know me, Cole. What if I am terrible? What if I snore, or I am mean in the mornings, or I have some horrible habit that drives you insane? Then I will buy earplugs, make you coffee before you wake up, and learn to live with whatever horrible habit you have." Cole smiled. "I am a rancher, Zelda. I am used to dealing with things that are difficult and stubborn and occasionally try to kick me. I think I can handle you." "I occasionally try to kick people," Zelda warned. "Good. I like a challenge." They sat there grinning at each other like idiots, hands clasped, until one of Cole's ranch hands rode up with a question about a broken section of fence. Cole excused himself reluctantly, squeezing Zelda's hand before letting go, and she watched him stride away with the hand, already deep in discussion about the repair. She returned to the workshop in a daze. The cylinder of the music box was nearly straight now, the careful application of precise pressure having worked the bent section back into alignment without damaging any of the delicate pins. She had perhaps another day of work before she could reassemble everything and test it. Part of her was excited to finish the job and restore the music box to working order. Another part, larger than she wanted to admit, was sad that finishing the repair would mean she had no reason to keep coming to the Double J every day, unless she created her own reasons. The thought brought her up short. Was she really considering this? Considering a relationship with Cole Jackson, a man she had known for less than a week? It went against everything she had told herself about staying focused on her work and not letting emotions distract her from her goals. But what were her goals, really? She had wanted to prove herself, to show that a woman could succeed in a man's profession. She had done that. The clock tower was visible proof of her abilities, and her reputation had been growing steadily over the past 2 years. At what point did proving herself become enough? At what point could she allow herself to want something more than just professional success? She thought about Cole's ranch, the way his face lit up when he talked about his plans for the future. She thought about the books stacked in his living room, evidence of a mind that was constantly curious and engaged. She thought about the careful way he handled his mother's music box, the tenderness that spoke of a capacity for deep emotion beneath his tough exterior. She wanted this. She wanted him. And for the first time in years, Zelda allowed herself to admit that wanting something for herself, something that had nothing to do with proving her worth or fighting for respect, was okay. That evening, as she prepared to ride back to town, Cole walked her to where Athena was waiting. "Will you come back tomorrow?" he asked. "I will need to if I want to finish the music box," Zelda said. "And after the music box is finished," Zelda looked up at him. The evening light made his eyes look more green than gray, and there was a vulnerability in his expression that made her chest ache. "I would like to keep coming back if you would like me to. I would like that very much." Cole hesitated, then reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek. "I would like that more than anything." Zelda leaned into his touch, her eyes falling closed for a moment. "This is terrifying," she whispered. "I know." Cole's voice was just as quiet, "but I think it might be worth it." She opened her eyes and smiled at him. "I think so too." He helped her mount Athena, his hands steady on her waist, and watched as she rode away. Zelda looked back once and saw him still standing there, silhouetted against the setting sun. Her heart felt too big for her chest, filled with an emotion she was not quite ready to name. The next day, Zelda finished straightening the cylinder and began the process of reassembling the music box. It was painstaking work, requiring her to align dozens of tiny components perfectly while maintaining the precise tension in the spring mechanism. One mistake could damage the comb or throw off the timing, ruining the melody. Cole brought lunch to the workshop, but instead of eating on the porch, he pulled up a stool and sat beside her, watching her work. "Tell me how it makes the music," he said. Zelda showed him the cylinder with its hundreds of carefully placed pins. The cylinder rotates slowly as the spring unwinds. Each pin is positioned to pluck a specific tine on the comb at exactly the right moment. The length and thickness of each tine determines its pitch, so you get different notes depending on which ones are plucked. String them together in the right sequence and you get a melody. "So it is like a mechanical memory," Cole said thoughtfully. "Someone decided what notes to play and where, and the machine remembers it perfectly forever." "That is a beautiful way to put it." Zelda looked up at him. "I never thought of it that way, but you are right. It is a memory made physical. That is why my mother loved it so much, I think. Her own mother had given it to her when she left Ireland. It played a song from her childhood, something her mother used to sing to her. After her mother died, the music box was the only way she could hear that song again." Cole's voice was thick with emotion. "She would wind it up and sit by the window, listening and crying. I did not understand when I was young. It seemed silly to cry over a song, but now I understand." It was the only part of her mother she had left. Zelda set down her tools and took Cole's hand. "And now it is the only part of your mother you have left. I am going to make sure you can hear her song again." "You already have," Cole said, "just by being here, by caring enough to try." They sat in the workshop until the shadows grew long, sometimes talking, sometimes working in comfortable silence. Zelda found that having Cole nearby did not distract her as she had feared it might. Instead, his presence was calming, grounding her in a way that made her hands even steadier. By late afternoon, the music box was fully reassembled. Zelda checked and rechecked every connection, making sure the spring tension was correct and the cylinder could rotate freely. Finally, with Cole watching anxiously, she closed the lid and turned the key. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, soft and clear as morning bird song, the music box began to play. The melody was achingly beautiful, a simple tune that spoke of green hills and distant homes. Zelda recognized it as an Irish folk song, one she had heard played on fiddles in taverns but had never known the name of. The notes were pure and true, each one crystal clear, and the timing was perfect. Cole stood frozen, his hand pressed against his mouth and tears streaming down his face. He made no sound, but his shoulders shook. Zelda closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around him, holding him tight as he wept. She did not tell him it was all right, or that he should not cry. She just held him and let him feel whatever he needed to feel. When the music box wound down and fell silent, Cole pulled back and wiped his eyes. "I am sorry," he said roughly. "I did not mean to fall apart like that. Do not apologize. She was your mother. You have every right to grieve." Zelda touched his cheek gently. "Did it sound the way you remembered?" "Exactly the way I remembered. Better, even." Cole covered her hand with his. You gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. How do I even begin to thank you for that? You do not need to thank me. I am just glad I could help." Zelda smiled. "Besides, you have already given me something valuable." "What is that?" "You made me remember why I fell in love with fixing things in the first place. It was never about proving myself or fighting prejudice. It was about taking something broken and making it whole again. About preserving memories and connections that matter. I had lost sight of that, but you reminded me." Cole pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "We are a good team, I think. You fix broken things, and I apparently remind you why you love it." "A very good team," Zelda agreed. They stood there holding each other as the last light faded from the sky. The music box sat on the workbench behind them, its song silent now but ready to play again whenever Cole needed to hear it. Zelda thought about memories made physical, about the things we hold onto to remember the people we have lost. And she thought about new memories being made, about the possibility of building something that would last. That night, as she lay in bed at the boarding house, Zelda admitted to herself that she was falling in love with Cole Jackson. It had happened faster than she thought possible, but it felt as real and solid as the gears in a clock tower. She had no idea where this would lead, but for the first time in years, she was excited to find out. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both natural and extraordinary. Zelda continued to take repair jobs in town, but she spent most of her free time at the Double J. Cole taught her to ride properly, not just the basic skills she had picked up on her own, but the kind of horsemanship that would let her work cattle if she wanted to. Zelda taught Cole the basics of mechanical repair, showing him how to maintain his equipment properly and make simple fixes without having to call for professional help. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Cole told her stories about growing up on the ranch, about learning to rope and brand and ride before he could read. Zelda described the wonders of Philadelphia, the gas streetlights and the shops full of goods from around the world, and the strange mix of wealth and poverty that existed side by side in the city. They also talked about the future, carefully at first, then with increasing confidence. Cole wanted to expand his herd and improve his breeding stock. He dreamed of the Double J becoming one of the premier cattle operations in Wyoming territory. Zelda wanted to open her own shop in Sheridan, a proper workshop where she could take on bigger and more complex jobs. She wanted to hire and train apprentices, maybe even other women, showing them that they could make a living with their skills and intelligence. "What if we combined those dreams?" Cole asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "What if you moved your workshop out here? You could have one of the outbuildings, something bigger than what you have now, and you would not have to pay rent to anyone." Zelda looked at him carefully. "Cole, are you asking me to move in with you? I am asking you to marry me." The words tumbled out in a rush, as if he had been holding them back for a while and could not contain them anymore. "I know it has only been a couple months, and I know people will say we are rushing, but I do not care. I love you, Zelda. I love the way your mind works, the way you see problems as puzzles to be solved instead of obstacles. I love how you are not afraid of anything, how you face the world with your chin up and your hands ready to work. I love waking up knowing I will see you today, and I hate going to sleep knowing you are back in town instead of here with me. Marry me. Build a life with me. Let me spend every day for the rest of my life watching you fix impossible things." Zelda's eyes were stinging with tears. "That is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Is that a yes?" "That is absolutely a yes." Zelda launched herself into his arms, nearly knocking him out of his chair. "Yes, I will marry you. Yes to everything." Cole caught her and held on tight, burying his face in her hair. Thank God, I have been terrified you would say no. Why would I say no? You are kind and smart, and you look at me like I hung the moon. You support my work instead of trying to change me. And you have excellent taste in books. Cole laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. The books sealed the deal, did they? The books helped. Zelda pulled back to look at him. But mostly it is you, all of you. I love you, Cole Jackson. I love you too. Cole kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools. Should we go into town tomorrow and talk to the minister? I do not want to wait any longer than we have to. Neither do I, Zelda said. But we should probably tell a few people first. Mrs. Henderson will be hurt if she hears it from someone else. They rode into Sheridan together the next morning, and the news of their engagement spread through town like wildfire. Mrs. Henderson cried and hugged Zelda, declaring that she had known from the moment she saw them together that they were meant for each other. Frank Morrison, the blacksmith who had doubted Zelda's ability to fix the clock tower, grudgingly admitted that Cole was getting a hell of a woman. The mayor congratulated them both and joked that the town could not afford to lose its best mechanic, so he hoped Cole planned to keep her supplied with work. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church on the edge of town. Zelda wore a dress borrowed from Mrs. Henderson, pale blue with lace at the collar and cuffs. Cole wore his best suit, which he confessed he had not worn since his father's funeral. They exchanged vows in front of a small gathering of friends and neighbors, promising to love and support each other through whatever challenges life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed Zelda with such enthusiasm that several people in the congregation laughed and applauded. Zelda did not care. She was too happy to be embarrassed, too overwhelmed with the rightness of this moment to worry about decorum. The reception was held at Mrs. Henderson's cafe, which had been decorated with wildflowers picked from the meadows around town. There was cake and coffee, music provided by a local man with a fiddle, and more well wishes than Zelda knew what to do with. She danced with Cole until her feet hurt, then danced some more because she could not bear to stop. As the evening wound down and people began to drift away, Cole pulled her aside. "Are you ready to go home, Mrs. Jackson?" Zelda loved the sound of that. Mrs. Jackson. She had never thought she would take anyone's name, had always assumed she would stay Zelda Carmichael for the rest of her life. But becoming Zelda Jackson felt right. It did not erase who she had been, it just added something new. "I am ready," she said. They rode back to the Double J under a sky full of stars, Athena following behind Cole's horse on a lead. The ranch looked different to Zelda now. It was not just Cole's home anymore. It was their home, the place where they would build their life together. Cole carried her across the threshold, a tradition he insisted on even though Zelda pointed out that she was perfectly capable of walking. He set her down gently in the main room, and for a moment, they just stood there looking at each other, suddenly shy despite all the time they had spent together. "I have something for you," Cole said. He went to the cabinet where he kept his mother's music box and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "I have been working on this in secret for the past 2 weeks. I am not skilled like you are, so it is not perfect, but I hope you will like it." Zelda unwrapped the cloth to reveal a wooden box about the size of her hand. It was made from the same burled walnut as the music box, carefully shaped and sanded smooth. When she opened it, she found that it was divided into small compartments, each one perfectly sized to hold different tools. "It is a travel kit," Cole explained, "so you can carry your most important tools with you when you go out on jobs. I know you usually use the saddlebags, but I thought this might keep things more organized." Zelda ran her fingers over the smooth wood, touched beyond words by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Cole, this is beautiful. You made this. I told you, I do repairs on tack and equipment. I can work with wood and leather pretty well, just not gears and tiny screws." He looked uncertain. "Do you really like it?" "I love it." Zelda set the box down carefully and threw her arms around his neck. "I love you. Thank you." Cole held her close, and Zelda felt the last of her defenses crumble. She had spent so many years protecting herself, building walls to keep from being hurt. But Cole had somehow slipped past all those defenses without her even noticing. She was vulnerable in a way she had never allowed herself to be before, and instead of being terrifying, it felt liberating. They made love that night with a tenderness that left Zelda shaking. Cole touched her like she was precious, something to be cherished and protected. And Zelda, who had always prided herself on her strength and independence, allowed herself to be vulnerable, to accept the love he was offering without reservation. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Cole's bed, talking quietly in the darkness. "What do you think your mother would have thought of me?" Zelda asked. Cole was quiet for a moment. "She would have loved you. She always said I should look for a woman who was not afraid to speak her mind, someone who could stand on her own 2 feet. She did not want me to marry some delicate flower who would wilt the first time life got hard. She wanted someone strong for me, someone like you." "I wish I could have met her." "Me too." Cole kissed the top of Zelda's head. "But in a way, you did. You fixed her music box, brought her song back to life. That is a kind of meeting, I think." Zelda thought about that, about the connection between past and present that the music box represented. "Do you want children?" she asked suddenly. "We have never talked about that." "I do," Cole said. "Someday, when we are ready, I would like to have a family, people to pass the ranch on to, but there is no rush. I am happy just being with you." "I want children too," Zelda said. "I want to teach them to fix things, to show them that problems are just opportunities to learn. And I want them to have what we did not have. Parents who are there for them, who love them and support them no matter what." "They will have that," Cole promised. "They will have everything we can give them." Zelda fell asleep in Cole's arms, feeling safer and more content than she had felt in years. When she woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the window and Cole's steady heartbeat beneath her ear, she knew she had made the right choice. This was where she belonged. The months that followed were busy and fulfilling. True to Cole's word, he converted one of the larger outbuildings into a proper workshop for Zelda. It had good light, plenty of space for her tools and equipment, and a sturdy workbench that Cole built himself. Zelda moved all of her things from the boarding house and set up her new shop, and within a week, she had more work than she could handle. Word of her skills had spread beyond Sheridan. Ranchers from miles around brought her broken equipment, everything from clock mechanisms to steam engine components. She repaired firearms for the local sheriff, fixed a complicated loom for a weaver in town, and even took on a commission to build a custom timepiece for a wealthy mine owner in South Pass City. Cole was endlessly supportive, taking over household chores when she was deep in a difficult project and bringing her meals when she forgot to eat. He never complained when she worked late into the night, or when she got so absorbed in a problem that she barely spoke for days at a time. He seemed to understand that her work was not just a job, but a fundamental part of who she was. In turn, Zelda learned the rhythms of the ranch. She helped with the spring branding, discovering that she had a knack for keeping the records organized and accurate. She learned to read the weather and the land, understanding when the cattle needed to be moved to better grazing and when storms were coming. She even learned to cook, though she was the first to admit she would never be as good as Mrs. Henderson. The ranch hands, initially skeptical about having a woman around, came to respect Zelda after she repaired a complicated piece of haying equipment that had been broken for months. One of them, an older man named Pete who had worked for Cole's father, told her that she was the best thing that had ever happened to the Double J. "The boss is happier than I have ever seen him," Pete said, "and you are handy to have around when something breaks." As fall arrived and the work on the ranch slowed down, Zelda discovered that she was pregnant. She told Cole one evening as they sat by the fireplace, his mother's music box playing softly in the background. Cole's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He pulled her into his lap and held her close, his hand resting gently on her stomach. "We are going to be parents," he said wonderingly. "You and me, we are going to have a baby." "Are you scared?" Zelda asked. "Terrified," Cole admitted, "but also excited and grateful. And about 100 other things I do not have words for." Zelda understood completely. She felt the same way. The pregnancy was not easy. Zelda suffered from terrible morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and there were days when she could barely get out of bed. But she was determined not to let it slow her down too much. She continued to work, modifying her schedule to accommodate the fatigue and nausea, but refusing to stop completely. Cole worried constantly, hovering over her like a mother hen and trying to convince her to rest more. They had their first real argument when he suggested she should close the workshop until after the baby was born. "Absolutely not," Zelda said firmly. "Women have been having babies and working for thousands of years. I am not made of glass. I know that, but you are not getting enough rest. You are exhausted all the time." "I am exhausted because I am growing a human being inside my body, not because I am working too hard. And even if the work is tiring me out, it is my choice to make." Cole ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "I am just trying to take care of you." "I know," Zelda softened, "and I appreciate it, but I need you to trust that I know my own limits. If I am doing too much, I will scale back. But do not ask me to give up my work. It is too important to who I am." Cole was quiet for a long moment, then he pulled her into his arms. "You are right. I am sorry. I am just so afraid of losing you. I lost both my parents, and the thought of something happening to you or the baby terrifies me." Zelda held him tight, understanding his fear because she felt it too. "Nothing is going to happen to us," she said, even though she knew it was a promise she could not guarantee. "We are strong, both of us. We are going to be fine." Winter came, and with it the first real test of their marriage. A blizzard swept down from the mountains in late January, burying the ranch under 3 feet of snow and cutting them off from town for almost 2 weeks. The temperature dropped so low that water froze in the well, and the cattle had to be brought in close to the buildings to keep them from wandering off and freezing to death. Zelda, now 7 months pregnant and moving slowly, did what she could to help. She kept the fires going, cooked for the ranch hands who were working around the clock to keep the livestock alive, and used her mechanical skills to repair equipment that broke from the extreme cold. One night, when the wind was howling so loudly that it sounded like a living thing trying to get into the house, one of the hands burst through the door with terrible news. A section of the barn roof had collapsed under the weight of the snow, and several horses were trapped inside. Cole and the hands immediately rushed out into the storm to free the animals and repair the damage. Zelda wanted to go with them, but Cole made her promise to stay inside where it was safe. She agreed reluctantly, hating the feeling of helplessness as she waited for news. The men worked through the night in brutal conditions. When they finally stumbled back into the house near dawn, they were frost-bitten and exhausted but triumphant. They had saved all the horses and shored up the roof enough to keep it from collapsing further. Zelda made hot coffee and wrapped blankets around Cole, who was shaking from cold despite his heavy coat. "You did good work tonight," she told him. "Could not have done it without the hands," Cole said through chattering teeth. "Pete is the one who figured out how to shore up the roof safely." Zelda made sure all the men were warm and fed before allowing herself to rest. As she and Cole finally crawled into bed, she felt a surge of love and pride for her husband. He was a good man, the kind of leader who worked alongside his employees and gave them credit for their contributions. She knew their child would be lucky to have him as a father. The baby arrived in early April, just as the last of the snow was melting and the first wildflowers were pushing up through the muddy ground. The labor was long and difficult, lasting almost 20 hours. Mrs. Henderson came out from town to serve as midwife, bringing with her a younger woman who had training as a nurse. Cole paced the main room like a caged animal, unable to settle. Every time Zelda cried out, he flinched and moved toward the bedroom, only to be turned away by Mrs. Henderson with firm instructions to stay out of the way. Finally, just as the sun was setting, a baby's cry rang out. Cole froze, his heart pounding. Mrs. Henderson emerged from the bedroom a moment later with a broad smile on her face. "You have a son," she announced. "A healthy, beautiful boy. And your wife is tired but fine." Cole nearly collapsed with relief. He rushed into the bedroom to find Zelda propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale with exhaustion. But she was smiling, and in her arms was the smallest, most perfect human being Cole had ever seen. "Come meet your son," Zelda said softly. Cole approached slowly, almost afraid to disturb the peaceful scene. The baby was wrapped in a soft blanket, his tiny face scrunched up and his little fists waving in the air. He had a shock of dark hair and seemed to be trying to focus his eyes on his mother's face. "He is beautiful," Cole whispered. "He looks just like you. He has your nose," Zelda pointed out. "And I think he is going to have your eyes." Cole sat on the edge of the bed and carefully touched the baby's hand. Tiny fingers immediately wrapped around his, gripping with surprising strength. Cole felt something shift in his chest, a sense of responsibility and love so overwhelming that it brought tears to his eyes. "What should we name him?" he asked. They had discussed names for months, but had never been able to agree on anything. Now, looking at their son, Zelda knew exactly what his name should be. "Thomas," she said. "After my father, Thomas Carmichael Jackson, so he carries both our families with him." Cole nodded, his throat too tight to speak. "Thomas, it was perfect." The first few months of Thomas's life were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. He was a good baby, sleeping in reasonable stretches and nursing well, but the constant demands of caring for an infant left both Zelda and Cole drained. They took turns walking the floor with him at night, and Zelda learned to work with Thomas strapped to her back in a sling that Cole made from soft leather. As Thomas grew, his personality began to emerge. He was curious about everything, reaching for tools in Zelda's workshop and watching with fascinated eyes as his mother assembled tiny mechanisms. Cole joked that they were raising a little engineer, but Zelda could see elements of Cole in Thomas too. He had his father's stubborn determination and his ability to focus intently on a task until he mastered it. When Thomas was 6 months old, Zelda took on a project that would cement her reputation as one of the finest mechanics in Wyoming territory. The railroad company approached her with a problem. One of their locomotives had developed a chronic issue with the valve timing that no one could diagnose. The engine was losing power and efficiency, and the railroad was losing money every day it was out of service. Zelda spent 3 days examining the locomotive, taking apart the valve system piece by piece. She finally discovered the problem: a manufacturing defect in one of the valve seats that was throwing off the timing by a fraction of a second. It was such a subtle issue that no one else had even thought to look for it. She fabricated a new valve seat using tools and materials from her workshop, installed it, and tested the engine. The improvement was immediately apparent. The locomotive ran smoother and more efficiently than it had when it was new. The railroad paid her handsomely and spread the word about her skills. Within months, she was getting requests from railroad companies and mining operations across the territory. Cole built an addition onto her workshop to accommodate the larger projects, and Zelda hired 2 apprentices to help with the overflow of work. One of the apprentices was a young woman named Sarah, 17 years old and desperate to learn a trade that would let her support herself. Zelda saw something of herself in Sarah's determination and took her under her wing, teaching her everything she had learned from her father and everything she had figured out on her own. "You are giving her the opportunity you wished someone had given you," Cole observed one evening as he watched Zelda and Sarah working together on a complicated piece of mining equipment. "I am giving her the opportunity I had to take for myself," Zelda corrected. "But yes, I hope I can make it easier for her than it was for me. She should not have to fight as hard to prove herself." Cole came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You are changing the world, you know that, one fixed gear at a time." Zelda leaned back against him. "I am not trying to change the world. I am just trying to do good work and help people who deserve it." "That is how you change the world," Cole said. "One person at a time." As Thomas grew into a toddler and then a young boy, the Double J prospered. Cole expanded the herd and improved the bloodlines, and the reputation of his cattle spread throughout the territory. Zelda's workshop became known as the place to go for repairs that other mechanics said were impossible. Together, they built a life that was both successful and deeply satisfying. When Thomas was 4 years old, Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and when the baby arrived in the cool days of October, it was a little girl with Zelda's dark hair and Cole's gray-green eyes. They named her Caroline, and she was as different from Thomas as 2 children could be. Where Thomas was serious and focused, Caroline was all laughter and mischief. She kept them on their toes, getting into everything and showing no fear of heights or speed or anything else that should have worried a small child. "She is going to be trouble," Cole said fondly as he watched Caroline, barely able to walk, try to climb up on a fence railing. "She is going to be extraordinary," Zelda countered. "Just like her father." Cole pulled Zelda close and kissed her. "Just like her mother, you mean?" The years passed in a blur of work and family, challenges and triumphs. Thomas showed an aptitude for both mechanics and ranching, spending his mornings helping his mother in the workshop, and his afternoons learning to work cattle with his father. Caroline was pure chaos, a whirlwind of energy who seemed capable of charming anyone she met. When Thomas was 10 and Caroline was 6, Zelda was approached by the territorial government with an unusual request. They wanted her to design and build a new clock tower for the Capitol building in Cheyenne. It would be the largest and most complex timepiece in the territory, a symbol of progress and sophistication. Zelda accepted the commission, seeing it as the culmination of everything she had worked toward. She spent months on the design, creating something that was both functional and beautiful. The mechanism incorporated several innovations of her own design, including a self-winding system that used changes in temperature to maintain tension in the spring. The installation took 6 weeks, with Zelda traveling back and forth between Cheyenne and the Double J. Cole managed without her, though he admitted he hated every moment they were apart. Thomas helped his father with the ranch work, showing a maturity beyond his years. Caroline missed her mother desperately, and made Zelda promise never to leave for that long again. When the Capitol Clock Tower was unveiled, it was declared a masterpiece. Newspaper articles described it as the finest example of mechanical engineering in the American West. Zelda's name appeared in publications from San Francisco to New York, and she received offers of work from clients as far away as Chicago. But Zelda was not interested in fame or fortune beyond what she already had. She was happy at the Double J, happy with her workshop and her family and her life. She turned down most of the offers, accepting only those that interested her, or that could be completed without leaving home for long periods. As Thomas entered his teenage years, he began to talk seriously about his future. He loved the ranch and wanted to continue his father's work, but he was also fascinated by the new technologies that were transforming the West. The arrival of electricity, the expansion of the railroad, the development of agricultural machinery that could do the work of dozens of men, all of it excited him. "I want to modernize the Double J," he told his parents one evening. "I want to bring in better breeding techniques, install wind pumps for water, maybe even get a steam tractor to help with the haying. But I also want to learn more about mechanics, to be able to maintain all that equipment myself." Cole and Zelda exchanged glances. They had both suspected this was coming. Thomas had inherited the best qualities of both of them, Cole's love of the land and Zelda's analytical mind. "If that is what you want, we will support you," Cole said, "but you need to understand that modernization costs money. We would have to be smart about it, make changes gradually as we can afford them." "I understand," Thomas said. "I am not expecting everything to happen at once, but I think the ranches that adapt are going to be the ones that survive. The old ways are changing." Zelda felt a surge of pride. This was the kind of thinking that had driven her west all those years ago, the understanding that the world was changing and the willingness to change with it. "Your father and I will help you however we can," she said. "And when you are ready, the ranch will be yours to run as you see fit." Thomas's face lit up. "Really, really," Cole confirmed. "Your mother and I have been talking about this. We built the Double J for you and your sister. We want you to take it forward to make it something even better than what we created." Caroline, who had been sitting quietly in the corner with a book, suddenly spoke up. "What about me? Do I get to help run the ranch too?" Cole smiled at his daughter. "You can do anything you want, sweetheart. If you want to work the ranch with your brother, that is fine. If you want to follow your mother into mechanics, that is fine too. Or you might decide to do something completely different. The point is, it is your choice." "Good," Caroline said firmly, "because I want to be a veterinarian. I want to take care of animals and help them get better when they are sick. Dr. Miller says I have a gift for it." Zelda and Cole looked at each other in surprise. Neither of them had known Caroline was serious about this, but it made sense. Caroline had always been drawn to animals, spending hours with the horses and cattle, and she had a natural gentleness that made even the most skittish creatures trust her. "Then that is what you should do," Zelda said. "We will find a way to make it happen." Caroline beamed and went back to her book, satisfied. Zelda marveled at how confident her children were, how certain of their paths. It was so different from her own experience, the years of doubt and struggle. But that was exactly what she and Cole had wanted for them, the freedom to choose their own futures without having to fight for every opportunity. The years continued to pass. Thomas went away to school to study modern ranching techniques and returned home with a head full of ideas. Caroline studied with Dr. Miller, the local veterinarian, and showed such promise that he began to talk about taking her on as a full partner when she was old enough. Zelda's workshop remained busy, though she took on fewer projects than she had in her younger years. She was content to work on things that interested her, and to spend more time teaching Sarah and her other apprentices. Sarah, now a skilled mechanic in her own right, had opened her own shop in Sheridan and was training apprentices of her own. "You started something," Cole told Zelda one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "There are women all over the territory now doing work that would have been impossible when you first arrived. You opened that door." "I just walked through it first," Zelda said. "They did the rest themselves. Still, you should be proud." "I am proud," Zelda admitted, "but not just of that. I am proud of our children, of the life we built together. I am proud that we took two broken people and made something whole." Cole took her hand. "We were not broken. We were just waiting to find each other." Zelda smiled. "You always know exactly what to say." "That is because you can fix anything except my tendency to be sentimental. I would not fix that if I could. It is one of my favorite things about you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to deep purple. Inside the house, they could hear Thomas and Caroline arguing good-naturedly about something. The sounds of the ranch settling down for the night surrounded them. Horses moving in the corral, cattle lowing in the distance, the soft creak of the windmill turning in the breeze. This was the life Zelda had built, piece by piece, like assembling a complicated mechanism. Every choice, every challenge overcome, every risk taken had led to this moment of perfect contentment. She had fixed the clock tower that no one else could repair, proving her skills to a skeptical town. And in doing so, she had met the cowboy who had looked at her and said, "You can fix anything," and meant it as a compliment rather than a challenge. Cole had been right in a way. She could fix anything. But the most important thing she had fixed was not a machine or a mechanism. It was her own heart, which had been closed off and protected for so long. Cole had opened it gently, patiently, and helped her understand that strength did not mean facing everything alone. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Cole stood and offered his hand. "Come to bed, Mrs. Jackson. Tomorrow is another day." Zelda took his hand and let him pull her up. "Another day to fix things." "Another day to live," Cole corrected. "The fixing is just part of it." They went inside together, closing the door on the night. Upstairs, Thomas and Caroline had finally stopped arguing and gone to their rooms. The house was quiet, filled with the peaceful silence of a family at rest. Zelda undressed and slipped into bed beside Cole, who immediately wrapped his arms around her. This was her favorite moment of every day, the quiet intimacy of lying next to the man she loved, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing and knowing that she was exactly where she belonged. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Cole whispered back. "Forever." Forever turned out to be a very long time, filled with more joy than Zelda had ever thought possible. She and Cole grew old together, watching their children grow up and start families of their own. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from up north and brought her to live at the Double J. Together they modernized the ranch exactly as Thomas had dreamed, installing new equipment and implementing breeding programs that made the Double J cattle some of the most sought after in the territory. Caroline went off to veterinary school, one of the first women in the West to do so, and returned home with a degree and a young veterinarian husband. They opened a practice in Sheridan that served ranchers and farmers for hundreds of miles in every direction. Caroline's reputation for skill and compassion grew until she was known throughout Wyoming as the best animal doctor around. Zelda watched her children succeed with a satisfaction deeper than anything her own accomplishments had ever brought her. She and Cole became grandparents, then great-grandparents, and the Double J rang with the laughter of children for decades. The workshop remained Zelda's sanctuary. Even in her 70s, When her hands were not as steady as they once were, she still took on special projects. She taught her grandchildren to fix things, passing down the skills her father had taught her so many years ago. Some of them took to it naturally, while others were more interested in different pursuits. Zelda loved them all equally, telling them over and over that the most important thing was to find what they were passionate about and pursue it with all their heart. Cole remained by her side through everything, constant and steady as the mountains that rose behind the ranch. He still ran cattle even in his 60s, though he finally hired a foreman to handle most of the day-to-day work. He spent his free time reading, accumulating an even larger collection of books that filled every wall of the ranch house. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the Double J for a celebration. There were children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren everywhere, along with friends from town and neighboring ranches. Someone had brought a photographer, and he captured images of 4 generations of the Jackson family standing together. That evening, after the crowd had dispersed and the children had been put to bed, Zelda and Cole sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The clock tower in Sheridan was visible in the distance, its mechanism still running perfectly after more than 50 years. Zelda had maintained it herself for decades before training Caroline's oldest son to take over the work. "You ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Choosing me, choosing this life?" "You could have gone anywhere, done anything. You had the talent and the determination." Zelda looked at him in genuine surprise. After 50 years, she would have thought he understood. "I chose this because it was what I wanted most. You, the ranch, our family, this is my greatest accomplishment. I fixed a lot of things over the years, but building a life with you is what I am most proud of." Cole's eyes were bright with emotion. "You are the most remarkable woman I ever met. That was true the first day I saw you on that clock tower, and it is still true now." "You thought I could fix anything," Zelda reminded him. "I was right," Cole said. "You fixed the clock tower. You fixed my mother's music box, and you fixed me, though I did not know I was broken until you showed me what being whole felt like." Zelda leaned against him, and they sat together watching the stars come out. The music box was still in the house, carefully maintained and still playing perfectly. Sometimes, when Zelda was working in her workshop, she could hear it through the open window, the melody drifting on the breeze like a message from the past. Her father would have been proud of what she had built, she thought. He had taught her to fix things, but she had learned on her own how to build them, how to take broken pieces and create something new and whole, how to look at the impossible and find a way to make it possible. Cole fell asleep first, his head resting against hers, and Zelda sat there holding him and thinking about all the years they had shared. They had not been perfect years. There had been hardships and losses, droughts and hard winters, setbacks and disappointments. But through it all, they had faced everything together, supporting each other through every challenge. When Zelda finally woke Cole to go inside, he smiled at her with the same warmth he had shown that first day in Mrs. Henderson's cafe. They walked into the house hand in hand, past the photographs that lined the walls showing the life they had built together. In the end, Zelda thought as she drifted off to sleep in Cole's arms, she had been right to come west all those years ago. She had found exactly what she was looking for, even though she had not known what that was until she met a cowboy who looked at her with respect and saw not a woman trying to do a man's job, but a skilled mechanic who happened to be female. He had told her she could fix anything, and she had believed him. And in believing him, she had fixed the most important thing of all, the loneliness that had haunted her since her father's death. She had found a place to belong, work that fulfilled her, and a love that sustained her through everything. The clock tower she had repaired stood as a monument to her skill, visible for miles around. But the real measure of her life was not in the things she had fixed or the mechanism she had built. It was in the family she and Cole had raised, in the lives they had touched, and in the love they had shared for more than half a century. Zelda Jackson had fixed the clock tower that no one else could repair. But more importantly, she had fixed her own life, turning it from something broken and uncertain into something beautiful and whole. And in the end, that was the greatest accomplishment of all.